Now look, I've been waiting for a very long time for this. I don't want you to go spoiling it, all right? I know you've got a bit of a reputation for being a wild child, but let's just come to an understanding, you and me. I respect you, you don't kill me. Deal? What do you mean, maybe?
Hello everybody and welcome to a very special entry in my series on affordable dream cars. To begin with, this is the first time I have ever driven a Dodge Viper. Second, a 1996 Dodge Viper GTS in blue with white stripes is one of my childhood icons. Now this isn't a blue and white GTS, but it is a 1990s GTS nonetheless. For those who are unaware, and believe me, I'm no expert when it comes to Vipers, let me summarise what's important about this car. The Viper debuted in the early 1990s as essentially Chrysler's tribute to the old school muscle cars of the 1960s, particularly the Cobra, and that may be one reason behind the snaky name of this car. The original was a very serious pared back thing with a thumping great big 8-litre Lamborghini engineered V10 up the front and no roof, no side windows, no door handles on the outside. It was a very basic vehicle. Chrysler realised fairly quickly that they probably need to give the car some modern amenities if they wanted to sell more than a handful. They also realised there was great potential in taking the Viper racing, and so the second generation Viper was born in about 1996, and it introduced the hardtop or GTS variant. There were a raft of different changes. Apparently early Viper production was a little bit haphazard, with Chrysler just doing things as and when they could, but from 1996 onwards they treated it like a proper production car with scheduled changes year on year, making it a little easier to buy, maintain them. The big thing about the GTS, of course, is its striking looks. Now, if you get a little bit close to it, you'll notice some odd details like the enormous arch gaps and the fact that the boot doesn't open in the way that you think it might. It's the glass that in fact opens and does provide you with actually a fairly reasonable storage area. The simple truth, though, is that to criticise the Viper is to wholly misunderstand the point of it. This is a car that in any sane world should probably never ever have happened, especially not from a risk-averse large car company. It's the sort of thing you'd expect a small little independent to produce. But you know what? I'm so glad that they did. The Viper went on for 5 generations in total, the first 2 being fairly similar and then the later ones being somewhat distinct. The engine grew in capacity up to 8.4 litres and significantly in power. Early cars were around about 400 horsepower, this one being about 450, and by the end of its production run it was making about 645. The car's intent also changed quite dramatically. To begin with, it was a sort of no-frills roadster that was a little bit of an animal, and by the end it was a track weapon. Dodge will proudly tell you that the Viper, the last one, still holds many records at circuits around the world, by which I mean America. If you watch a review of any sort of modern car, especially supercar, one of the things people will always comment on is the fact that, oh, well, actually, it's really easy to drive and it's not scary like old cars are at all. Well, I can report that the Viper is indeed a very intimidating vehicle to drive. This is not for novices. It is low, it is wide, the thing feels absolutely gargantuan, although you do have a brilliant view out of that bonnet. You sit right below it and all those curves are just sensational. You're also very wary of the fact that it's only you responsible for keeping all those 450 horsepower and, more importantly, nearly 500 pound-foot of torque in order. chassis fidgets about a little bit when it's not being challenged. It's actually a relatively comfortable car. These seats are very typically American, not particularly snug, quite heavily cushioned. Not sure whether they're actually leather or just some weird sort of vinyl contraption, but they work well enough and they kind of suit the car's image. The interior is, as you might expect it, reasonably low rent. Highlights include the bevy of gauges up here. We have temperature, we have oil pressure, we have fuel, and we have voltage. And let's see what she can do. As you might expect from an engine with 4 times the capacity of my daily driver Honda, it has ample torque from next to nothing. And that makes the relatively lowly 6,000 RPM red line less of an issue than you might think. The car really likes to follow the curve of the road, and it tramlines quite a bit. Unsurprising when you consider the gargantuan rubber that's fitted to it and the very wide track. But that makes it all part of the challenge. The brakes are actually quite nice, quite progressive. One thing that really surprises me is how nice to use the gearbox actually is. Now, the lever is sort of canted right over. It looks very weird, looks like it's broken, but this is how all Vipers always look. It's a 6-speed unit too, which given the age of the car is actually quite nice. And in American fashion, if you want to go all the way into 6th, it's going to be geared for a zillion miles an hour. One thing that does disappoint with the Viper is the noise. Early cars had a side exit exhaust system that was pretty raucous. Unfortunately, regulations even of the time meant that that couldn't go on, and so Dodge rerouted the exhaust. It still goes through the door sills, which is why there is still a warning on there telling you how hot it can get, but it then snakes itself all the way to the back. So if when you start up a Viper you're expecting it to thunder into life, you are going to be sorely disappointed. The throw on that gearbox is precise, if a little long. You can heel and tow actually quite easily. You do have to be aware of the fact that the pedals are really far offset. The throttle pedal is where you'd expect the brake to be. Visibility out is not too bad so long as you want to look forward, but with this incredibly low roofline, you've got the effect of wearing a helmet even when you aren't. It would be a struggle to get in here with a lid on. I know people that have done it, and in fact I've been in a Viper with a helmet on, and it is rather snug. So here you go, just for fun, I'm at 1500 RPM in 4th gear, 30 mile an hour, foot down is 50. It's absolutely effortless, this car. Now there is a reasonable amount of texture coming through this steering wheel, and the car's actually pretty darty too. It feels quite lively, very keen to turn actually, something that surprises me, but you really got to keep on top of it. Yeah, you can feel that back end wants to wiggle. It's actually a really engaging driving experience for all those people that whinge and moan and whine that modern cars don't really require any involvement from the driver whatsoever. Try a Viper. Try a Viper, because you gotta be on your toes with this one. In my dream 10-car garage, there is absolutely a spot for a Viper, and I've always been worried that I'd drive one and actually think that they were in fact quite rubbish. Nothing of the sort. I wouldn't want to really be pressing on that much harder down these roads with this car, because you can feel it, the whole thing's just on a real knife edge. This chassis is alive, but it's exciting. It's really exciting. Now, as part of this affordable dream car series, we're also talking about the realities of ownership, not just the 10-minute test drive experience. So what's a Viper like? Well, in the UK, as you might imagine, they are an extraordinarily rare sight. I've actually been to a Viper meeting once many moons ago, and there is a friendly and dedicated owners club around these cars here in the UK. The pedal travel for both the clutch and the throttle is very long indeed, much like a TVR really, and that is very helpful. Prices of these tend to go, I've seen them as low as about 30 grand, anywhere up to sort of 6 figures for some of the rare special edition and late model cars. For a car like this, in fact this particular car, you're looking at less than £50,000, so still well shy of my £100,000 cap that I've put on this series. And the really good news is that for specialist vehicles like these, they do have a tendency to hold their money very well. That's something that's very important to me with this affordable dream car series, because it's no good having a car that's nice and cheap and easy to maintain if it's going to go and depreciate by 30 grand in a couple of years. The Viper on that front is actually generally very well behaved. They can be potentially difficult cars to sell because the market is small, but then there's not going to be a lot of competition, and something like this GTS is always going to be a special thing. In fact, such is my connection with the Viper that even my kitchen splashback is painted in GTS blue. True story. Maintenance on the Viper, from what I can read up, is not that bad. Not really anything above or beyond a lot of classic cars of this era. The fact it's a V10 doesn't really enter into it. Yes, it's going to drink a fair bit, but then so will most cars of this age with this kind of performance, and you're really unlikely to be daily driving it, so I don't think that's a concern. Insurance is also not too bad because you can put these on a specialist or classic policy. Some of these cars can sit around for a while, and so it's worth checking all of the usual suspects, your rubbers, hoses, all that kind of stuff. And that's what the guys at Total Head Turners had to do with this car when they brought it in. Total Head Turners are generally known for their specialism in GT40 and Cobra replicas, but they will also sell rare, unusual and interesting classic and sports cars as and when they can get them in. They actually sold this car once before, many moons ago, and helped its original owner here in the UK source it. This was a Canadian built car, and it has a few interesting features like the speedo in kms rather than miles per hour. It's also got a few touches that you rarely see on UK market cars, including the amazing chrome wheels. The big thing with Vipers to keep an eye on is damage. Although maintaining these is not particularly expensive, repairing them can be. Because they were a rare car, and this generation having gone out of production the best part of 2 decades ago, parts can be difficult to get a hold of, and if you find them, expensive. I was looking up prices for that enormous and magnificent bonnet earlier, or hood as I should probably call it, and apparently at one stage they were going for between $10,000 and $12,000 because you simply couldn't find them. Ultimately though, would I own a Viper GTS? Yes, I would. Is it going to be the first dream car that I'll buy? No, I don't think so. But there is absolutely space in my dream car garage for one. It is a fantastic thing, and I've waited 24 years to drive one of these. I'm a cynical old devil these days, but a Viper is a special thing. Thanks for watching. Thanks to the guys at Total Head Turners for letting me loose in it. Please like, comment below, subscribe if you haven't already, and I'll see you all for the next one. Bye bye.